We have Lodrina with DFIR data and World Championship Powerlifting.
Yes, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you, Will, and all the other speakers who've gone today, and I'm excited to speak with you. So today my talk is going to be about DFIR data and World Championship Powerlifting. I am going to talk about forensics first. So I've got a lot of ground to cover. Let me kick it off. To those of you who don't know me, I'll share a quick introduction. My name is Lodrina Cherne. You can find me on Twitter at Hexplates. My day job is at Cybereason, that's the OWL. I work for our office of the CISO, where I get to work on standards and policy. I also teach forensics for the SANS Institute. So if you're interested in the technical content I present today, you can come hang out and spend 6 days with me learning all kinds of nitty-gritty about it. But there's two other things professionally that I'd like to share with all of you. One is that I'm in a program at the Aspen Tech Policy Hub. Aspen Tech Policy Hub develops future policy leaders. And if you're interested in policy or interested in learning about it, please reach out to me. And also please reach out to me especially if you are local to the Boston, Cambridge area. That's where I'm coming in from today. So I'd love to meet more local people. So let's keep going here. I have a ton of information to share with you. I'm going to start with a very basic introduction to what digital forensics is, and then we'll start to look at some digital forensic data. So I know that PancakesCon has a lot of people who are new to InfoSec, who are just trying to get their feet wet in the field. So for those of you who don't know what digital forensics, or DFIR, which stands for Digital Forensics and Incident Response is, digital forensics is a branch of forensic science dealing with identification, preservation, analysis, and reporting of digital evidence. So if you are somebody who happens, like me, to be a fan of TV crime shows, I'm totally a big fan. It is way more than just zoom and enhance. What it can involve are specialties in computers and host-based forensics. That's mainly what I do. It can also involve cell phones, network forensics, looking at packets, memory, malware, cloud, and the field is really evolving. It's not that long ago that more people started talking about connected vehicles, smart home devices, and you know, that's what excites me about the field, is getting to be that digital crime solver who comes in after the fact and figures out what happens on a system when it's handed to me. So what we're going to dive into today is, even if you are brand spanking new to digital forensics, I want to share with you some things that you can look for as you use your devices, as you use your computer and your cell phone, to figure out when there might be digital forensic data that can be recovered by somebody who comes along after the fact, like myself. Now, your reasons for wanting to know about this information can be different. You might have a different threat model than your friend or your neighbor. And so there are different reasons you might want to know about this. But the first step is going to be identifying data. So if you are a Microsoft Office user like I am, you might know and be familiar with, when you open up Word for the first time in a session, it might prompt you to open recent documents. This is the kind of thing I'm going to be talking about completely throughout this whole DFIR section, which is, if your computer is remembering that yesterday you worked on this Word document, it's got to be stored somewhere. Now, those of you who are a little more familiar with forensics, I'm going to try and give you some nuggets too. I'm going to share with you, for each of these artifacts I talk about, where you can track down the data. So for example, in this case, when you open Microsoft Word, this data is going to be found in the mtuser.dat registry file. But wait, there's more. So if you're a Windows user, you might be used to right-clicking on one of these Microsoft Office applications and seeing your recent documents in this other location. Well, that is stored in a completely different set of artifacts. And these involve jump lists and shortcuts, or shortcuts are sometimes called link files or .lnk files. So one application like Microsoft Word is so robust, it's storing information all over your system to try and make the system easier to use for you. And by the way, when you notice something that just popped up at the top of my screen that says recover unsaved documents, that's a sign that your information is being tracked. I'm going to take a quick pause and just do an audio check here. All right, and I should be back with my audio now. Let's continue on. What I've got up on my screen is an example of how your computer knows that you have downloaded files. So if you open up a Word document that's downloaded from the internet, you might see something like this pop up. You might see this yellow bar that goes across the screen that says, be careful, files from the internet can contain viruses. Do you want to open this document? So this is one example of something that shows you're being tracked. By the way, this is stored in an alternate data stream zone identifier. So this is a little piece of information that goes along with your file that says it's been downloaded from the internet. And I'm going to go through a few more examples because right now you might be thinking, how did my computer know this about me? Well, it's being tracked in different places all over your system. Incognito browsing is one that some people listening now might be familiar with, but are you familiar with how incognito browsing or in private browsing can track you? Now, on my screen right now is a clue that might tell you that your information is being tracked, even if you're not a digital forensic professional. If you have any guesses, feel free to toss them into Slack. The reason that you might know you're being tracked is that, dun, 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 let me bring it up. On this screen are forward and back arrows. So if you're using an in private or incognito session, that you can go forwards and backwards in your incognito session should be a clue that somewhere your history is being tracked. Okay, and this is one of my favorites. File and folder opening. If you like viewing your photos folder as tiny little previews and icons like I have on the right, and you like viewing your downloads folder or your documents folder as a list like I have on the left, that your computer remembers, I always want my pictures folder to be tiny little icons, and I always want my documents folder to be a list. This again means that this artifact is being tracked somewhere. which happens to be in shell bags. By the way, this artifact, a similar artifact exists on Mac OS computers as well. So this is not unique to Windows. And I've hidden a few Easter eggs in my presentation, and some of them are up on my screen right now. I wanted to pay tribute and give a nod to some of the female pioneers in computer science and code breaking who've come before me. And I do want to take a very quick, serious moment to honor one of them, Becky Bass. I want to really recognize and share the story of Rebecca Gurley Bass, who passed away in 2017. It was March 2017, so this is somewhat the anniversary of her passing. And she was known as the den mother of intrusion detection and also known as InfoMom. She was born in Alabama and was a US citizen of Japanese heritage. And content warning, I will just spend one sentence on this. I especially want to highlight her story, given the violence against Asian American people that we've seen in Atlanta in this past week. So I want to tell some of her story. In 1973, she was the only woman at University of Alabama at Birmingham in the engineering department. She went on to work at Xerox and NSA in the National Computer Security Center, where she was particularly able to advocate for women and minorities. She was the recipient of the NSA Distinguished Leadership Award during her time there. She went on to become Deputy Security Officer at Los Alamos National Lab. And later in her life, she went on to become credited with building the FBI's first computer crime squad and became a venture capitalist. She wrote some books that are foundational to our field, including the title Intrusion Detection. And she co-authored a guide to forensic testimony. But in addition to these titles, she is remembered fondly as somebody who cared about people. The more I was reading about her story in preparation for this talk, the more I wish I'd gotten to know her. And I was told that basesecurity.org, B-A-C-E security.org is one place you can keep up with efforts to honor her legacy. So I'm very thankful that at this conference, we're talking not just about technical issues, but about expanding our horizons. And I thought that given the events of the last week and what we're talking about today, all kinds of things InfoSec related and not, that this might be a good time to honor Becky's memory. So back to techie things. I can switch gears. I did want to share another artifact that I love, which is these little folder previews I mentioned in my last slide. These tiny little previews are saved on your computer. So on Windows, they're saved in your thumb cache or in a thumbs.db file. And by the way, even if I deleted this folder and tried to remove any evidence that I ever was in this folder, ever had these files, these little previews still stick around. So for a forensic investigator like me, these artifacts are really gold mines to find data after the fact. One reason that you as a user might know that these little icons exist is if you have a really giant folder full of photos, like your vacation photos. The first time you go to load and open up that folder, these little previews take a while to generate sometimes. But the second time you go into that folder, they load much faster. So this should be your clue. Okay, that loaded way faster. I think these icons might be cached somewhere. So things to look out for. There's way nerdier, low-level things being tracked on your system. Sticking with Windows, the fact that you can delete your usage history. that you can delete how many cycles, how much CPU time you've spent in certain applications, the mere fact that you can delete this information means it's being tracked somewhere. And in this case, this is in your System Resource Utilization Management Database, or your SRUM DB. Once you start to think about this, you will see examples all over the place. How did your computer know that we had, for those of us in the United States, a time zone change last week? And this does not apply just to computers, Windows, Mac, Linux. This also applies to your mobile phones. This one has been very, very obvious to me that our phones are recording what we type because I have a super unique name. I do not know and have never met another Lodrina. So every time I get a new phone and I need to type in my name, I get those red squiggly lines coming up saying, is this really the way you want to spell this? But after I tell my phone that first time, no, that's really the spelling of my name, I want you to remember that, it remembers my name from then on. The same thing happens with mobile predictive text. Your phones know what words you like to type together. And in this case, there's a database on your phone that is tracking what words you type near those words. And again, after the fact, somebody like me can come in and recover that database and figure out what you were doing. So again, for many of you, you might be new to this field. You might be trying to get into digital forensics. You might be thinking this is maybe a career you'd like to pursue. Here is your big takeaway. If it's remembered for you, it can be recovered. The next couple shots I have to share with you are things that I took screenshots of for myself to remind myself, this looks like an interesting artifact. I wonder if I can find out where this is saved. So things like when Windows upgrades, when sticky notes is telling me that it's remembering something for me, or when PowerPoint is telling me it will save a copy of my data, even if I don't go and hit save. Again, the best thing you can do to get into digital forensics is having the right mindset, to be aware of these things, to be asking questions, and to be inquisitive. Because remember, systems are always changing, and every time a major OS upgrade happens, there is no manual that comes out that says you can find the forensic artifacts here, here, and here, and here's what they all mean. So the best thing you can do is observe and hypothesize what you think might be happening, test things out, and keep trying. Report, iterate, share your findings with your peers. Again, if you're new to the field, there are lots of ways to get involved. I think many of you who found this con are probably on Twitter. There's a great community under hashtag DFIR. So I hope to see you there. And now, halfway through, I get to pivot topics. And I feel so fortunate to be able to share a little bit about powerlifting with you. So here's how we're going to start. We're going to start talking about the basics, and then we're going to talk about competition powerlifting. So I'm going to introduce myself again. Hi, my name is Lodrina Cherne. I've competed all over the country and all over the world. I've won national and international competitions. I've stood on podium at the World Championships and set multiple state and federation records. So what does this all mean? What is powerlifting? Powerlifting is a barbell sport, and it consists of 3 lifts. There's the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. So in a powerlifting competition, your goal is to lift the most weight possible in all 3 lifts. So in competition, which is also called a powerlifting meet, in a meet, when you go up to the platform and you are in front of that audience and in front of those judges, your goal is to go successfully squat the barbell with the barbell on your back, lower yourself down, and then come back up. You try that 3 times. Your best successful lift in the squat is recorded. Then you go and you do a bench press, lying on the bench, pressing a barbell from full extension down to your chest and back up again. You do that 3 times. Your best, most successful lift is recorded. And then the deadlift is where the competition ends. That's your standard pick things up and put them down lift. Your best successful deadlift is recorded. So your most successful squat plus bench press weight plus deadlift is your total. And that's what you're judged and scored on. So we'll get into each of the lifts in just a minute. But when we're talking about competition, I want to talk a little bit more about how you would get into a competition and what that means. So let's talk about competing in powerlifting. So if you are here and you're thinking, I love training in the gym, I'm pretty good with a barbell, I want to do a meet. Awesome. Welcome. I would love to help you do that. Here's how to do that. By the way, before I start this section, I will say just as much as I both teach a week-long technical class and attend lots of technical training, I've been in powerlifting long enough that I also, for fun, go to coaching conferences that are 3 days long, a week long. So I could go on and on about this topic forever. But my TLDR moment is I'm going to say, find a meet. You can Google this up. You can go to a site like Powerlifting Watch. And Powerlifting Watch has listings of meets you can do all over the United States and all over the world. So if you pick something local, you're going to be in a certain federation, and different federations have different rules and different divisions. But finding a meet that maybe you can drive to, or something that's a really short trip away from wherever you're training, is going to be a great place to meet more local lifters and get your feet wet. And I say, just find a meet, because everything else I'm going to talk about kind of depends on the type of event you're going to. Now in powerlifting, there are different divisions. For example, there are weight classes and potentially even age classes. So just like a sport like wrestling, like MMA, you are going to be in a weight class. My best advice is for your first meet, go in weighing whatever you are weighing that day. Because there are going to be so many different technical things going on, different timing things you have to worry about, warming up with people you've never warmed up with before, that weighing what you weigh when you go to a meet is just one less thing to worry about. Don't worry about making weight. So You can be in a certain weight class. You can potentially sign up for a certain age class. And there are also different equipment divisions you can sign up for. I'll mention powerlifting apparel in a meet typically means that you need a singlet. You need that wrestling onesie to compete in so that judges can see that you're performing the lift to the correct standard of the rule book. Now, this might be my best advice for somebody who's interested in powerlifting, interested in doing their first meet. Once you sign up for an event, again, Google it up or go to Powerlifting Watch and find a meet to participate in. Read the rule book. And the rule book will tell you what you can wear in a meet. It'll probably tell you that you need that wrestling singlet. It'll say probably that you can use a belt, and the belt can be of a certain dimension. It can't be thicker than 5 inches one way or 13 millimeters in width. It might tell you if you can use knee sleeves on your knees, if you can use wrist wraps on your wrists, and it'll tell you a lot about the standards of the lift, which I'm going to go into next. Oh, but first, one big question. A lot of people tell me that they love training in the gym, they love doing the 3 barbell lifts, but they're worried about not being strong enough. Well, I'd like to share this video with you from the Lobo High School powerlifting team. First, because they are exceptionally strong and talented young ladies. But I really want to show that powerlifting can be for anyone. To be able to compete in a meet, the minimum amount of weight you need to lift in a squat is typically the barbell plus some collars. So we're talking around 55 pounds for the squat. Same thing in the bench press. If you can bench press 55 pounds, again, the bar at arm's length, just like these ladies, down to your chest and back up again, you are good to go. And for the deadlift, the weight is going to be a little bit more because when the barbell is resting on the ground, you need to have some of those big plates on the ground, just like in the video right now. So typically for the deadlift, you'll need to be able to lift around 145, 150 pounds. So if you're wondering, well, I'm really not strong enough to do a competition, with a little bit of training, I suspect you are. So again, if you are interested, there's very little stopping you. With that out of the way, I will go into the performance of each of the lifts. So with the squat, I already mentioned the barbell is on your back. You bend down until the crease of your hip is below your knee. So just like I am in this video or in this screen, my hip is below my knee. And from there, I want to come up and stand up in one smooth motion. If you read your rule book for a powerlifting federation, you'll see that there are lots of gotchas about doing the lift. For example, you can't stand up halfway, sink back down, and then stand up the rest of the way. The barbell needs to move smoothly and fluidly all the way down and all the way back up without any shaking or wavering up and down. Now, there's a few other things going on. There is a judge sitting in front of you, and that judge, after you take the barbell out of the rack, will tell you to start your lift or start your squat. Only then, after you've been given the start command, can you actually go down, come back up and do your lift. But then you have to pause and wait for that judge to tell you to rack the bar, to bring it back into the squat stand. So if you are totally new to this, this is kind of like patting your head and rubbing your stomach. And I'm glad that you can only see part of me on video because it's very hard for me to do. But there's a lot going on in a meet. You've got somebody giving you instructions who's in front of you. You might have spotters surrounding you. And by the way, there are judges to your left and to your right, making sure that you're getting low enough. So you've got 3 judges in this lift, and if they all think that you've done the lift successfully, they're going to give you what you hope will be 3 white lights. By the way, if there's one judge who sees something off, let's say the judge on your right-hand side doesn't think that you got quite deep enough, they might give you a red light. But you know what? This is still okay, because 2 out of 3, 2 white lights out of 3 possible lights, or 2 out of 3 judges agree you did a good lift, and you'll get credit for that squat. So far we've learned that even if you're used to squatting, even if you know how to perform a barbell squat, and you love doing this in the gym, in competition, there's a lot going on. So now that we've been introduced to the judging system and how they give commands and some of the nuances, let's move on to the bench press. So the standards of performance for the bench press are kind of similar to the squat. You're going to have a judge who tells you when to start and when to end the lift. And when they say start, you want to take the barbell at arm's length with your arms locked, bring it smoothly down to your chest, and pause. After the bar is motionless, the judge will tell you to press, and only then do you get to heave the barbell back up again. One smooth motion, no ups and downs, no one side and then the other side all the way. One smooth motion to finish. And then when the judge gives you that command to rack, then and only then will you have successfully completed the lift. Now, there's even more nuances here. And this is why I said a few slides earlier, find a meet that tells you what federation you're in and read the rule book, because there can be nuances like your feet have to be flat on the ground the whole time. Some federations will allow you to be up on your tippy toes, but almost every single one will have a rule that your shoulders and your butt need to stay on the bench. Now, because we're talking competition powerlifting, stress on the term competition. In a competition, you can train to do certain things to really shorten your range of motion. And you might see me bringing my chest up, effectively arching my back. And this, when done properly, is a very safe and effective move to help you lift more weight. So again, competition powerlifting, there are going to be lots of things that you might not be used to in the gym, including a start, a bench and rack command from the judge, keeping your feet or keeping your toes on the ground, and keeping your butt, your shoulders, and sometimes your head on the ground as well. And there are certain ways to play within the rules to maximize the amount of weight that you're going to lift. Now, we go on to my favorite lift, the deadlift. This is your standard, pick things up and put them down lift, but there's a couple of variables that you, the lifter, can choose from in here as well. What you see in my photo on the screen from when I was at the World Championship competition in Finland a few years ago is an example of a conventional deadlift. Your feet are inside your shoulders, so your hands are outside of your feet. You can also lift in a sumo deadlift, which is your legs are out wide and your hands are in narrower on the barbell. One's not better than the other necessarily. It depends on your physiology and your training and coaching and really your body and comfort level. So in competition, the deadlift is really my favorite lift A couple of nuances include a judge will tell you when to put the barbell down, and you cannot slam the barbell. You really need to place it down gently. If you just drop the bar when you're done, if I were to open my hands from this position on the screen, that lift would be disqualified. So deadlift happens to be my favorite lift, but there's nuances to that in judging as well. By the way, conventional deadlift is my favorite right there, probably because I've been so successful with it. So now I get to tell a little bit of my story. I don't often get to talk about this, so I'm really excited to here today. How on earth did I get into powerlifting? Well, it actually started with being a bicycle racer. And I happened to live in New England, and I was cyclocross racing one year. Cyclocross is kind of like the steeplechase of bicycle racing. It's a sport where you are competing in the fall and winter over asphalt, gravel, sand, snow, and you're doing this every single weekend. Well, one winter here in New England, we had a ton of snow. As much as I am, let's say, not afraid of being out in the ice and snow, it was just too much for me one year. So I started going to the gym. I started lifting weights, and the more I trained, the more people would kind of stop what they were doing and look at me and kind of say, wow, that's really good. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. I just enjoy doing this. But it kept happening enough that I was wondering, am I good for this gym? Am I good for a woman? Am I good for somebody my weight? Like I didn't really know what that meant, and I didn't really know how good I could be if I wanted to. So I signed up for a powerlifting meet, not knowing that you need a singlet, not knowing really much about the rules, and I just went and tried it out and really fell in love with the sport. Over the years, I started competing at local meets and was doing really well. I actually switched federations and started competing in an organization that had more competition, so I could compete against more people my size and compete at a more competitive national championships. And that national championships would set me up for the world championship level of competition that you've seen pictures from earlier in this competition. So I found out that I was really good at it, and I took it really far. I've been doing powerlifting for the last 10 years and loving it. I've done it all over the world in a bunch of weight classes. However, I think one of the things that's most special to me, and you've heard me say, I've changed federations, I've changed where I've competed to be in a more competitive group. I'm very, very proud of doing things that are fairly rare in the sport, which is at a lot of those competitions, I've competed at a team level, where you try and get people from different weight classes together and try and get a composite of people across different genders, across different divisions and weight classes to really create a united front. And I'm very honored to have had coaches and training partners who have done that with me over the years. And I hope to make it back to the international stage again soon. So sometimes when I tell people my story and how far I've gone in the sport, they ask me, well, what about going to the Olympics? Now, unfortunately, powerlifting is not an Olympic level sport. If you see a barbell sport in the Olympics, that barbell sport is where people are lifting up the barbell over their head and the barbell ends up way up high over their head. That is the sport of Olympic lifting. In Olympic lifting, well, it's different than powerlifting. However, Powerlifting does have the World Games, which is a quadrennial event every 4 years that I hope to make it to 1 year for non-Olympic sports. And there is also Paralympic lifting in the Olympics. So there are bench press athletes who use a specialized bench press. And here, this is Loveline Obiji from Nigeria, taking her last attempt at the bench press, and she eventually won gold in that competition. So I hope that you've been entertained with my stories about data and with powerlifting. I want to give a shout out to a couple powerlifters who are out on Twitter who are amazing lifters themselves, including Lou Hacks. Lou Hacks just competed yesterday, so big props to him. I hope to hear all about it soon. And there's some other lifters who've done incredibly well over the years. David Litchfield and Philip Wiley, if either of you are watching, kudos to you. And other folks like Rowdy, who are great lifters as well. And come join all of us. I mean, all of us very broadly who are techie people who do fit things at hashtag D4Fit and D4Fit.com. You'll find the whole community of folks in hashtag Red Team Fit, hashtag Blue Team Fit. And I know I have just maybe 3 minutes left. I'm gonna take a look in Slack and see if I have any questions. Thank you all for spending the time with me.
Thank you, Lodrina. Looks like we do have a couple of questions. They seem to be mostly focused on the powerlifting side of things. We have one as to what's your favorite or preferred deadlift form, and they offer Romanian, standard, and sumo as options.
Standard conventional deadlift. Love it, love it, love it.
Right on. We have another question. A little clarification. What is the not slamming about?
Ooh, the not slamming weights in competition. Well, first of all, it's a respect thing, showing respect to the judges, to the organizer equipment, to the people around you. And it can also be a safety thing. When you have people who are spotting and loading around you, you don't want weights that are slamming around and maybe getting out of control and hitting them. So in competition, a safety and respect thing, and something that I think translates well to training as well to make you stronger.
Fantastic. Thank you again for sharing this information with us. It's been a fantastic talk. We've loved having you here at PancakesCon.